Welcome to this session. So, most of you will have heard of the European Communication Monitor, which is a project by EUPRERA and by a lot of members who supported us in different countries. So, thanks to everybody who helps and helped in the last countries, in Italy, in Belgium, in Poland, and other countries, to attract respondents and to use also these data for insights, not only on a European but also on a national level. What we would like to do now is give a bit on a macro level, an overview, what, as I said here, what we have learned in now a decade of this research, with more than 22,000 respondents all over. And the colleagues who are here, Piet Verhoeven, University of Amsterdam, Moreno from University Rey Juan Carlos, Madrid in Spain, Dejan Vercic from Ljubljana, and Tench from Leeds Beckett University, and we are happy to have Betteke van Roelen here as a respondent. And Betteke was a member of the team for the very first edition of this survey, and from second edition on it was this team who developed it and ran it. So I just would like to give you a short overview on a macro level. And this means what we just have finalized last week, and the manuscript had been handed in, and it will be probably published in, we don't know exactly, in the February or March of next year, will be a book which we call Communication Excellence. And what we did here is really use the data from 10 years and try to give the macro picture. So what really have we learned? And we used it more to approach practitioners. So also really to have some insights what the profession can learn. I think this is what EUPRERA is about. Not about micro-research, but about research which is meaningful for the practice. And what we have used here, and that's on the lower level, is a comparative excellence framework. We have just finished an article, Dejan and I, we presented it last year in Oslo at the EUPRERA conference. It will be published this year in the Journal of Communication Management. And you might have heard about excellence and the Chronic series and so on, all about the criticism, it being normative. So the basic idea is here to use an approach which we know from management, excellence based on benchmarks. So it's not about an absolute level of being excellent or fulfilling some standards, but having some criteria and being better than the rest. And we use this now not only in Europe, but also in Latin America and Asia in monitors. And interestingly, and we see that in the book, always in different studies, different regions, about 1/5 of the organizations show up to be in the basket of the excellent ones, and 4/5 are not. And then obviously you can go in and identify what are the correct characteristics of the more excellent ones. And this is a basic approach, which we will see here, which hasn't been there 10 years ago, but we can use this large data set and this approach to go into that direction. And in this book, and this is just to overview it, because this is really the essence of these 10 years, we looked at these 10 years of results and said, okay, what really does it mean to us, and how we can we produce a meaningful insight? And what we would like to propose here, and we can go into detail here, that's not enough time here, is that to be excellent in corporate or in organizational communication, we have to talk about 3 levels. On the one hand, organizations themselves have to be structured and have to be strategies and a culture which allow communication departments and professionals to be excellent. For example, we just finished a study in Germany about SME, small and medium-sized enterprises. If the boss doesn't understand what communication and stakeholder relations is about, it doesn't help that you have a very strategic communication plan and very professional communication people. You have to have an organization which understands that being reflective, being embedded in society is important. And on the department level, obviously, you have characteristics which we all know. Departments have to be influential in the sense that they are really interact with other departments, with boards and so on. And they have to understand, to measure, to use big data, to have insights. Otherwise, they cannot fulfill their role. And obviously, professionals have to be solid. They have to have good education, ethical standards. They have to be able to network, something which we all know, but obviously we can talk about that. What does it mean to be networked nowadays? It's not just being outgoing, it's something else nowadays, and we can go on that level. So that's one insight. So talking about that, we have to talk about an organizational, departmental and professional level. And if we dive deeper into it, we were able to build up these data, obviously on a bit placative level. We call them 9 commandments of excellent communication. So if we go into more details about what is a connected organization, what is an influential department, and what is a professional who is ambitious really to deliver excellence, we see there are characteristics which we can explain. It's not totally new. You will find most of these things in literature and research, but which we also, based on our European data from 10 years, can at least, some more, some less, obviously, we dive deeper and less deeper in some of these subjects, explain, and also have empirical data to underline that. For example, for the influential departments, being embedded means, what we all know, being linked to the top management, being heard, understanding the language of business. Datified means being able to measure, to use measurement data, not only to measure to show you're great, but also to listen, to tell others what they can do with that. And being strategized, we researched that 1-2 years ago, means having a strategy and on different levels, not only a campaign planning strategy, but also an overall strategy, and probably a strategy which is aligned to corporate goals. And if you look at the data, we see that on these different levels, it looks quite different. Most really have a plan for how to run a PR campaign. But if you ask for the question, do you have really documents and processes to link your communication strategy to an organizational strategy, we know that both methods and practices are on a different level. So you see, that's a big picture. I can't go into more detail. I just want to motivate you, obviously, to read the book because it's quite new. And we also looked again at our own data, and it was interesting for ourselves to find really some new insights because it's a different perspective if you lean back and look on a more macro perspective, or if you look at data from 1 year where you're going really into the details. So that's one of the issues. And now I will hand over to Dejan, because this is like the result. I started here, but it all started, and it started even before the ECM was starting in 2007. And in EUPRERA there were some initiatives, and Dejan, Vercic, and others were involved to build all this knowledge based on literature and on what's going on in different countries.
So to understand European Communication Monitor today, it's necessary to understand the context in which it was envisioned. It's directly embedded into the DNA of the EUPRERA as such, because in 1998, I think that Anne-Marie Coton was the president, we started with a project which was called European Body of Knowledge project, where we started to search for literature about public relations in Europe. We did a Delphi study with which we scanned the situation in Europe. We did some conceptual work which resulted in books, and we produced several publications which are actually containing the work we have done in practically between 98 and 2005, where we completed the Delphi study research. We had a Bled manifesto with an open debate about differences between how public relations is practiced in the United States and in Europe. We started with investigating different roles we identified in Europe, like reflective model, which everybody is talking today, or how public relations is helping to upgrade communication competencies, not only of top management, but of other employees and things like that, which resulted in several papers you can see here. And then Vercic and I also edited the book, which contains not only overview of public relations practice in different European countries, but also some conceptual chapters. Now, out of all this work, actually, came idea that from this qualitative stage at which we were working originally, we should move to a more quantitative stage. And that's why between 2005 and 2007, we actually succeeded to move to this new stage of development. And as Ansgar already mentioned, in the original first team, both Beteke and I actually joined this new project. Then Beteke had to take rest for personal reasons for a couple of years, and the new team emerged, which then is now producing this research for next 10 years. But to understand the whole logic and the book, even to read the book today, one should remember how we have actually developed everything through EUPRERA for the past, not only 10, but basically we can talk about 20 years of research that it's embedded in here.
We have found so many things, it's impossible to present them here, so I've chosen two main conclusions that we could draw from this quantitative data for 10 years. And the rest will be in the book, which will be published next year. The first one is about mediatization and about media ties, as Ansgar said, one of the characteristics of excellent communication. And what we've seen in those 10 years, and it might be a kind of open door, but it's really not so much the case. We called it the great convergence of media importance and media use. And what we've seen over the years, and you can see it in this graph, is that all media are now, today, equally important and are equally used. And that was very different 10 years ago. If you look at the graph on the left, then you see that it was a differentiated use and importance of media, where especially press relations with newspapers were the most important and most valued in the field. And social media were just coming up. It was the line, the bottom line. And you see over the years that they converged to one media mix. And now communication professionals in Europe think that all these media, including face-to-face communication, social media, but also the gatekeeping media and communication with journalists are equally important. So this means, if you think about it a little bit more, that the work has become more complex and more complicated. And it's also a lot of more work than it was 10 years ago. So if you talk about competences, then you think that the communication professional of today really needs to be media savvy, to call it a bit like that. You have to be able to handle all kinds of media, and especially do not forget the gatekeeping media and the journalists. They are still important, only the other media rose to the same level as journalists and the traditional media. So that was one conclusion about media. The second one is about strategic issues for the field. And we've asked that every year, from 2007 until this year, and there's one big issue, and it's the biggest issue in all those years, and it's still there, is how to link communication to business goals. You see, it's the red line. It's started off in 2007 and about the same level as it is now. So many people think that this is the most important issue of the field. It was, in a short period of time, the digitalization and the new media were more important, but that's gradually gone down again, especially because a lot of people got used to working with these new media. So it's still a very important issue to link communication to business. The second biggest issue is also dealing with digitalization and the social media. And the third one, also stable over time, is how to gain trust in society for your organization. So business goals, trust and digitalization are the three main issues, and they were already there in 2007 and they're still here with us in 2017. So next to this media savviness of the first sheet, you could also say that the communication professionals need a kind of business savviness in a communicative way. How to connect in this organization, how can you connect your activities to the business of the organization. And this is, I think, one of the most important issues to address in the coming years. So we will get back to these issues in later editions, I presume. So these were two highlights of the monitor. These kind of graphs, the book is full of them, so I really advise you to read that. Some more about the competences.
What may not be familiar to everybody is that the instrument that we use for this is completed by, as Ansgar has said, only practitioners. So it's only practitioners that complete the survey. It's online. It's actually quite a long instrument, so we're very grateful for all of our practitioners who do complete it every year. And for those of you who support us, as Ansgar said, thank you, and keep encouraging people in your countries or in your regions to complete it. What we also do, as has emerged from what Peter says, we look at some questions that are very consistent for longitudinal analysis. But we also then have certain themes and topics that we focus on in more detail each year. One of the areas that I personally, as an academic and as a leader of courses in the past, in pedagogy in the university, we're interested in is the next generation of communicators. And of course, we're interested in what the skills are and the competencies and the knowledge requirements of those individuals and how that affects the programs, the teaching programs that we individually and collectively develop. So we have, in the past, had a focus on competencies, the competencies of the practitioner in our ECM survey. And that was then a trigger for a funding bid that we put forward to the European Union and the Commission for a research project, at the time the largest communications research project that was funded on what we called an EUPRERA project, which was the European Communication Professional Skills and Innovation Programme. If you can remember that, when I test you later, I'll give you a prize. So, hence EUPRERA. It was an interesting programme which involved both data collection on a macro level through the monitor, but also a large number of interviews with very senior managers and chief communication officers in 4 distinct roles. So we had this kind of question and agenda of trying to understand, as I say in the top box there, the context and the competency deficit as we identified from both the literature and from the studies that we were doing. For us, professionalisation was and continues to be part of that discussion and debate and is still an unresolved question, and we can often amongst ourselves debate whether that's a good thing or not, but certainly the aspiration to be more professional is something that we've endorsed in this work. So we can see through the mapping what we did was a literature-based benchmark. We then gathered and collected various empirical data from both quantitative and qualitative sources, alongside case studies and deep conversations with practitioners to produce various case studies. And the outcomes were, and they can be seen in the document that we produced, all of which is freely available, by the way, but there is this PDF document you can get online. But we were interested to understand these competencies, the complexity. We developed a range of matrix which helped to understand the practitioner in key roles that they played in corporate organizations. And on the back of which we then developed an instrument which we can use online, which is called P4ACE, which is a portal available, freely available still, for advanced communication education, where practitioners could self-diagnose their competencies and measure them against their peers in particular roles and their peers in different country contexts as well. We've expanded some of this work further since we completed this program of study, which was in 2013. So that's just an example of one of the spin-offs that we've done and how we've engaged and gone deeper in the work. And each year we look to do something different, as we've discussed already in the summation with the book this year, and ongoing with different themes and questions. It's also something, back to our members of EUPRERA, if any of you do have a really interesting area or idea, we're also very open to listen to what they might be as areas for investigation for new themes and new topic areas.
The knowledge that we have acquired professionals in the 10 years of European Communication Monitor and the COPSI It's being applied now to new researches in other continents. The Latin American Communication Monitor and the Asian Pacific Communication Monitor are part of a project Global Communication Monitor that is an extension of the European Communication Monitor to increase the knowledge of the profession in other regions of the world. As long as the European Communication Monitor, there's two sister researchers studies are organized by EUPRERA in partnership with other organizations in the area of influence of the two regions. The ASEAN Pacific Communication Monitor is conducted in partnership with the ASEAN Pacific Association of Communication Directors, Quadriga University, and Communication Director Magazine, and is sponsored by Prime. The Latin American Communication Monitor is conducted in a strategic partnership with DIRCOM, that is the Communication Director Associations in Spain, in cooperation with the main national professional associations in Latin America, and with the sponsorship of Llorente y Cuenca, that is an agency that, leader in that market. Both studies are conducted by research teams that are from universities in the two geographical areas. Altogether, these EUPRERA projects cover more than 80 countries with comparable methodologies. The Latin American Communication Monitor was conducted for the first time in 2014-2015. More than 20,000 professionals were invited to complete the survey through national and regional association database. 1,774 professionals started the survey, and we finally could analyze, made analysis over 803 cases from professionals working in organizations like corporation, non-profit organization, governmental, and communication agencies in 18 countries. The Asian Pacific Communication Monitor was conducted for the first time in 2015-2016. More than 21,000 professionals were invited through the database provided by Asian Pacific Communication Association of Communication Director and other partners in the regions. And 2,154 responders started the survey, and the analysis was based in 1,200 responses. We have to note that Asia Pacific has the 61% of the world population, and Latin American have about 600 million of inhabitants. And we don't know the total population, let's say that in Europe, of communication professionals in these areas, but however, these samples are the biggest ever approached in researches about the professions in our field. The second edition of these studies, the Latin American Communication Monitor just finished the second survey this September, and results will be delivered during the next spring. And 3,000 professional accesses to the questionnaire, and we have a total of 941 full responses that we are analyzing today. The Asian Pacific Communication Monitor survey will be launched now in the autumn, and so we will have comparative results from Europe, Latin American, and Asian Pacific regions in the next year, in 2017. And we expect also that a longitudinal analysis in these other regions will allow us, at the same as in the European Communication Monitor, in some years, to provide deep knowledge about the communication competencies of professionals, the competencies of communication professionals.
Well, being a sort of grandmother of this kind of research, I'm very happy to be able to respond. And first of all, I want to congratulate you. I'm proud of you. This exactly was what we had in mind when we started the European Public Relations Education and Research Associations years ago. And we wanted to have a platform for transnational, international, European research in our field. Okay, my comments. First, Angeles, fantastic that you spread the word and that you promote the European Communication Monitor in other continents. It's really impressive. That is how you really get interesting data. And it remembered me some 15 years ago when we had this European Body of Knowledge project and an outcome in a manifesto on what European public relations looked like. I remember that Dejan organized a Bladcom on this European manifesto, and he invited researchers from Africa, both Americas and Asia, to start a dialogue on all our approaches and ideas how to use public relations for a better connected world. For the first time, had a real dialogue, a conversation on all these different approaches and different sorrows about public relations. And I was thinking, what I remember of this EBOC project was most of all that these different approaches were seen as positive, as a gift. And we have to be very careful that we keep on having respect for different ideas. That's the only way a field can flourish. So, that's the grandmother part. Then now, the 9 commandments Ansgar presented. I really like this idea of these 3 levels. I do agree, they are all 3 important. And at first sight, they really looked like the levels of the excellence project of the Grunics in the 80s. But it is different, I agree. I don't agree that it is not normative. Of course it's normative. You select the criteria for excellence, Ansgar. I want to focus a bit on this ambitious professional. They have to be sagacious, clever, they have to be linked, connected, and solid. I would suggest that this sagacious, I had to look the word up, and linked are most of all personal attributes. Would you be so kind to explain a bit more about what you mean by solid? Because I think in solid, the knowledge and the skills come in. So I think that's interesting to learn a bit more of that. And then I come to Piet. Piet, you showed us some empirical data, and I know it is a meraboire. But for example, I learned from these data that connecting with business is an ongoing problem. And that is one of your excellence questions. So I would really like to hear a bit more on these 9 commandments. What have you learned from 10 years data regarding these 9 commandments? If this embedded, linked is a problem, there could be more problems. So perhaps you can talk a bit more about this linkage between the commandments of the excellence and your empirical data. Is it a minor problem? Is it a bigger problem? Another question. You know, Piet, you showed us that face-to-face communication is gaining attention. That's very interesting. And I think it's new. And it's a completely different competence. And then ECOPSI. You should enter the website of ECOPSI. It's a fantastic project, and it is indeed a spin-off of the European Communication Monitoring focusing on the competencies of especially senior communication professionals. Very, very rich outcomes. And we discussed it before, but I want to make 2 comments on that. I think we also urgently need research on what CEOs and clients want. And we need to know how they perceive what their communication managers can do for them. And I know Peggy from Norway did that kind of research, but we are, I think, too much oriented at these communication professionals, too much focused on the profession itself. We also need that kind of research. Perhaps that's your next project. And then I have a question I want to throw into the discussion. You didn't mention it, but in this ECOPSI project, most important knowledge and skills in your tree are business and management skills. And that is most of all because the communication professionals do not feel recognized. And I agree that management business skills are important, but I'm not quite sure whether that will help them to become recognized. And I'm really curious what you think about that. So, I raised some questions. And where shall we start?
So, first by thanking Vercic for these comments and for these insights. So you raised some questions, and probably we can simply try to answer them. Probably starting with a professional, and if you just switch it, because our because our expert on solid professionals and their competencies is Ralph.
What is solid? I mean, it's a very good question, and you will be very unsurprised to know that when we've formulated all of these commandments, yes, there's complexity in where you place something. So you're right that having sagaciousness, we were interested in the knowledge and to some degree the wisdom of the individual, the learning, the reflectiveness that they have as well. But for solid, we were really interested to focus on the attributes of what that person stands for. And really, when you read into it, and we had time, we'd talk more, we're really talking about the ethical framework of the individual, how that person behaves.
That's what you mean by solid.
It is. So solid for us, we're talking about is that issue of how they operate, how they behave, their ethical standards for themselves, but also for their peers and what their expectations are, and how they behave and encourage the behavior in others.
So that's a personal attribute too.
It is. And in that section, as you can see from the structure, is that we're moving down towards the individual. So we're focusing on the individual, and a lot of it is based around those personal attributes, the knowledge, the skills, and the competencies that they have, yes.
Thank you for your comments about the linking of business and communication, but also linking these empirical results to the 9 commandments. It's an interesting point. And, well, what we've seen, what I can say about this in summary, there's a lot more to say about that, but about 20% of the departments or professionals can be seen excellent if we have an empirical analysis. All in all, yes. So, about these excellent communication departments, you can say that they are better in all the 9 commandments that are in the book. So they are more globalized. Not that their company should be globalized, but they have a global mindset, so to speak. They are more mediatized, they're better linked, they're more strategized, etc. That being said, does not mean that they are also better in linking business to the communication, but they recognize the problem better, I would say. So they are reflective on their own activities and also on their own mistakes or shortcomings in doing this. So they see the question. That's what I would say about the excellent departments and this issue. Face-to-face communication, the second question. It's also very interesting, I think, I agree with you that that's coming up. But I think that's kind of in the slipstream of social media that face-to-face communication is becoming more important. And communication is getting more personalized. So also communication through the media is now getting more personalized than it used to be. So I think that fits well with that, although I agree that it's a very different competence if you communicate face-to-face or through media. So this is a very interesting issue for the profession, that this face-to-face communication and media, personalized media communication is something different, and that you have to work on the best ways to do that.
This data, as most of the data, empirical data which we have, is based on observing communication professionals. So we look at the communicator's perspective, and we know that we have some research also in this conference looking at stakeholders or audiences. You know, we look at how others whom we address perceive us, expand experiments and all this stuff. But obviously, strategic communication always means communication is used for the purpose of an organization. And so I think this is exactly what defines us, also specific, also in education. We have to understand, or students have to understand, how organizations work. And in yesterday's opening discussion, we saw exactly that, because the second keynote speaker always pointed out that it's the general perspective on a societal level, something else than having the perspective of an organization who, per definition, needs to work on defining itself and take decisions. You simply cannot have a diagnosis, you have to take decisions quite practically. And this means, and it really links to this question of why probably linking communication and organizational strategies is an ongoing issue, because we only can do that if we not only understand how organizations are organized, but we have to understand the rationales of organizations and what others expect from us. And now, how can we do that? Yeah, we have to ask the executives, we have to ask these internal partners, business partners, some other departments who want something from communication departments. And obviously, here are our limitations, because we are communication public relations researchers. So obviously it's difficult for us, but we manage to approach communication professionals, but approaching, let's say, others in the business who are not really focused on communication every day, and at least are not focused on going into surveys from communication or about communication, is an issue. So Peggy did a large study which has been published in Norway. We did a study in Germany, which also has been published, and we were even, Günther was involved, able to compare perceptions and expectations of communication professionals in Germany with those from only board level members. But I just have to say, we needed a lot of money simply to buy the database, to motivate people. And we had a colleague from Berlin from management studies with a name who probably opened doors that people on the management board would even consider to answer some questions about communication. I think you're totally right, but I think it's a limitation. And if you go to qualitative research, approaching board members, at least in larger countries and companies, is a major problem. And especially here we're talking about perceptions. So not about single persons who are we would probably also talk to these people who understand what communication is, but our problem is more in the broad sense. What do really general managers, or in NGOs, you know, politicians, whatever, what is their perception, expectation of communication? And Dejan mentioned this historical perspective. And 20 years is like historical nowadays. But if you think that top managers nowadays, from the age group, you can look that up, are not 30 years old. They're 50, 55 years old. And then look at the textbooks, what someone who studied engineering or business administration 25 years ago learned about public relations. Nil. And if they learned something about marketing, it was not what we have today, like all mediatize and cross-media, they probably learn something about very simple concepts of a communication flow. I think this explains a bit what's going on, and it makes it very difficult to research. Just to close with that, because that's another project not linked to that, we have just finished some qualitative interviews in Germany, quite interesting, and we will present it in the future. We're just working on the data, which is again linked to exactly this question. What do top executives expect from you and how can you deliver? We had access to interviews and to documents showing how they present their communication strategy to the board. And then we asked them at the same time, how do you plan internally your strategy? And how does the board present it? And the interesting result is, it was always different. So if you looked at the presentation of the corporate strategy, which is used by the board, and if you used at these, they all have PowerPoint charts, obviously. You have to have that to present your million budget in your executive committee. It was all strategic and logical, but it was simply different. And one of the insights was, oh, you're right, it doesn't really fit together. But I think this explains a lot, because if you're a board member and you're presented a communication strategy, and it's presented so differently from what is your daily business, how you present your corporate strategy to your other board members, to your shareholders, yeah, then you just look at these projects. Oh, you did a nice project, you did that, and probably you're strategic, but I don't understand that. So it ends probably in a very pragmatic thing. Are they able to present their own work, to have some expectation management, understand what others want? But this is very qualitative. And obviously, we are not able to tell about the names of these companies. It's now not so easy to tell it, but I think it's a really interesting insight, which adds to exactly your question. We have to research that, but it's very difficult. And Piet talked about the excellence, and we see that in these companies, they are good, they have internal plans, they measure everything, but still, they only measure their own stuff. They know how to run campaigns, but it doesn't mean they have a way how to link it to the overall goals. Probably they're good, we don't know exactly, but it's a very interesting field, and it's not really traditional PR research, as you see here. It's really linking into the field of communication management, because we need theories and models from other disciplines to understand what's going on here. And there's also, obviously, in Lund at the moment, a similar project going on, which is quite interesting. It has been presented. Jesper Falkamer is not here today, but they have presented it 2 times in the last months. It's not published until now. And they did a quite interesting project in the same field, also some EUPRERA members. They asked not only professionals, communicators, and the bosses, but they also asked the employees in the organizations what they expect from their communication departments. And again, it's more about shaping realities. And I think that's exactly what we point for. Not on a technical issue, it's about what is our profession about and what is our research about. And you see many research opportunities here, which are very different from researching communication channels or even press relations. It's much more rich, and different methods have to be used there. And I think even in some probably regional areas and countries, it could be easier to do that than on a global or European scale. So there's a lot of research opportunities which we cannot do here in this quantitative survey, but some of these ideas can really be used in EUPRERA for on your own or for new partnerships to go on. That would be my, just to bridge it in the future. For those of you who are national partners, please use the data for further research, for exploiting the data for your countries. So I think there are many ideas also, if you're not involved in the projects, to draw on that, to use this as a starting point for your own research, and we would be happy to see more of them coming up in EUPRERA in the next years.